Up next hour, I should say, I'll ask Jim his concerns about the possible challenges to same-sex marriage. And the next hour of CNN Newsroom starts right now. I'm Pamela Brown in Washington. You are live in the CNN Newsroom. Across a deeply polarized nation, Americans are taking to the streets both denouncing and celebrating the Supreme Court decision to overturn a 50-year precedent. Some protesters taking up posts again outside the home of Justice Brett Kavanaugh. The reaction to the Supreme Court ruling so swift and so intense that the Department of Homeland Security is warning that violent extremism is likely. The DHS says its assessment is based on an increase in violent incidents after a draft opinion was leaked last month. Meantime, freshman GOP Congresswoman Mary Miller is trying to walk back a remark she made last night at a Trump rally in Minden, Illinois.
President Trump, on behalf of all the MAGA patriots in America, I want to thank you for the historic victory for life in the Supreme Court yesterday.
Well, that remark has gone viral. Miller's campaign says she very clearly meant to say victory for right to life and called the incident a mishap. Well, there's a new CBS News poll out today showing nearly 6 in 10 people disapprove of the decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, and that includes 2/3 of women surveyed. Joining me now is Republican Congressman Warren Davidson of Ohio. Good evening to you, Congressman.
Good evening, Pamela.
So let's talk about Ohio. Your state's heartbeat bill that is now in effect bans abortions once a fetal heartbeat is detected roughly 6 weeks into a pregnancy. That is a time when some women don't even know they're pregnant. There is no exception for rape or incest. So my question to you is, what happens when a 12-year-old girl falls pregnant after being raped? Are you okay with her being forced to carry that fetus to term?
Well, under Ohio's law, it doesn't ban things like abortificants. So let's say someone who was raped, you don't know you were raped for 2 months. I mean, I think that it's incorporated in to deal with that. Now, that is a compromise. People believe that life begins at conception. That's what the science says. So I think that as a public policy
the science is not conclusive on that, right? And there is no consensus on that life begins at conception. But I know that that is certainly something that you believe and other conservatives believe. But I just want to ask you again, because this obviously raises some tough questions, of course, right? What happens if a 12-year-old gets raped? Are you comfortable with her having to now carry that baby to term because there is no exception for her case now under Ohio law?
I fully support Ohio's law, and I commend frankly our governor and our legislature for passing it where previous administrations had failed. They passed it. It was held up by the courts, and a relief from the injunction was filed immediately on Friday. And it is now the law in Ohio. I think it's a great law, and it is a compromise. And like I say, rape is raised as an objection, but the heartbeat bill already deals with that. I mean, it's hard to conceive of somebody who doesn't know they were raped for 2 months.
Right. Well, look, I'm not going to put myself in the shoes of someone who was raped, but I am sure if they were here to speak with you, they would be pushing back on that notion. There's all kinds of traumatic experiences that would happen after such a thing, and processing it, and then finding out if you were pregnant and so forth. There's a lot of complexities. I do want to ask you about Ohio in terms of its rankings when it comes to infant mortality, and it's near the middle for maternal mortality. It's ranked 41st in infant mortality. African Americans are disproportionately impacted, and with this ban in place, that rate of infant mortality will likely go up. So what are you going to do to combat that and protect these disadvantaged women and children who are directly impacted by this abortion ban?
Well, look, Ohio, unfortunately, we have over half of the live births in Ohio are on Medicaid. So we have a really a disproportionate amount of our families that are growing are low-income families, and I think that overwhelmingly accounts for the loss of life in labor and delivery. And so I think we have to look at how do we strengthen that. Early treatment of anything that goes wrong in the pregnancy is always important. And I think it's just consistent prenatal care through that process. You know, my wife and I had our kids while we were in the Army. And you know, that was government operated healthcare. I would hope that the federally qualified healthcare centers that dot Ohio's counties would at least meet that standard. And where they fall short, you know, our office is open for you know, casework to try to support it. We haven't had any.
I know that this is an issue that gets a lot of people worked up, but I think there is a lot of concern right now that so many states, including Ohio, have these abortion bans, and there's been this fight for a baby in the womb. But what about the fight for the child after it leaves the womb and the disadvantaged mother? Are you going to commit to fighting for them?
I already do fight for them, and frankly, you know, look, as somebody who believes that, you know, life begins at conception, we want every baby to be a healthy baby, and we know that some babies are challenged at, you know, from birth. I just was at church this morning with someone who is providing foster care for a, you know, prenatal, you know, from the NICU. This baby's just now at full term, so spent the first nearly 2 months in NICU to try to get stable.
And there's all kinds of stories out there, but the bottom line is you say you're fighting, but there are 16,000 kids in Ohio who have been taken away. They're with caregivers other than their parents. I think it's 9,000 in foster care. There is concern that that system is just going to be overloaded and what's going to be done to help them with resources. I do want to ask you about former Vice President Mike Pence. He is calling for a national abortion ban. House leaders are calling for a national ban after 15 weeks. Do you support a nationwide ban?
Look, I believe life begins at conception, and I understand that that we have people who passionately disagree. If you look at where Democrats were on this issue, why was this case before the Supreme Court? They were unwilling for Mississippi to limit abortion to 15 weeks. Not only were that, House Democrats put on a floor that opposed, every single member of the House Democratic Conference opposed the Born Alive Survivors Protection Act. This is babies that have already been delivered. They still wouldn't want to protect that life. They supported basic Governor Northam's position that, well, the baby will be kept comfortable while the mother and doctor have a conversation.
Just to be clear, though,
that's not abortion. That's infanticide. So
just
it's
to
a
be
very
clear,
radical position on the other.
Do you support a nationwide ban on abortion?
I support Life at Conception Act in the House. I'm a co-sponsor.
So,
but when you look in Ohio, I think Ohio's heartbeat bill is a very reasonable position of compromise. And I would love to see states across the country get there, not by force, just by moral consensus that this is a life and it is precious. It should be protected. And if a mother says, you know, I just don't think I can raise this baby, there are millions of Americans who would love to adopt that baby. And hopefully we can make adoption and foster care a more viable option for everyone. And I think we should treat every life as precious. Unfortunately, the foster care system
is so incredibly broken, though. We've done story after story on that. But what it sounds like you're saying is you would like other states to adopt the bill like Ohio has, but you are not for a federal law mandating every state have abortion. Correct me if I'm wrong before we move on, because we do have other topics we need to get to.
Well, look, I'm a co-sponsor of the Life at Conception Act in Congress, and I think it's important that Congress says, look, if you want to push, you know, abortion from conception till delivery, on the Democratic side, we're going to push back with what we truly believe is life at conception. And I think the courts delivered a position that says, you know, it's okay if states are different. I mean, they could have gone to the full extreme position under the 14th Amendment that people would view as radical, but you know, no one can be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process. How do you provide due process?
And I know that's something that you have said you supported. Right, and I know you have supported that. The Supreme Court did not go as far, saying that it just should be left up to the states. And we've heard other Republicans also say they are not for a nationwide ban because it defies Republican principles of allowing the states to deal with issues. I want to move on to guns, though. Let's talk about this bipartisan gun safety bill the president signed into law yesterday. Republican Senator Rob Portman of Ohio, along with Republican Representatives Mike Turner, Steve Chabot, Anthony Gonzalez, and David Joyce, they all voted for this bill. Why didn't you?
I think it's unconstitutional. And I think, look, on the same day that we had a great opinion from the Supreme Court, we're passing bills that were unconstitutional. And instead of giving a vote on individual components of it, it was just take all of it or leave it. and no amendments. So same kind of broken
Well,
process from Speaker Pelosi.
but as you heard many of your Republican counterparts say, this bill will save lives and it still protects Second Amendment rights. So
No, it doesn't. The red flag law is unconstitutional. It's a civil
How is it
asset forfeiture that
unconstitutional?
says we can seize your guns first and give you due process later. And in the case for red flag
they
laws,
go
look,
before. I just have to be clear with our audience. In the red flag laws, you have state grants and another that there is due process. They do go before a judge and make their case. It is similar to child custody cases. There is due process.
no, but the person whose rights are being seized, whose property is being seized, whose rights are being denied, never has the right to confront their accuser. They never have the right to present it until after the action's taken. And frankly, the legal fees are going to be more expensive than some of the guns seized, so they're just going to buy more guns. And look, every state, the premise of this is we could say, you know, this person's sending off, you know, everybody knew Johnny was crazy, we should have stopped Johnny. Well, that didn't happen in states like Florida and New York, where we already have red flag laws. But every single state in the country has something like a Baker Act, where someone can be adjudicated mentally dangerous, mentally incompetent, and then you do the right thing. You take the person, not their gun. The person's the thing that's dangerous. The gun's going to lay in a drawer or on a shelf or in a safe. The person could end up driving a vehicle through a parade
Right, but
and still be a
AR-15s
danger
are much
to their
more
neighbors.
lethal. And their guns are the #1 killer of kids, according to the CDC. I mean, do you admit that a mass shooting could not happen without a gun?
Well, a shooting by definition, I mean, I suppose you could do it with arrows, but it'd be a lot harder to do it with mass. I mean, a shooting
not as
by
lethal.
definition is a gun.
Right, exactly. So it does take a gun. That is a component of a mass shooting. I mean, you know about guns. I know you're a former Army Ranger. You have advanced training in guns. A person can fire more rounds more quickly with an AR-15 than other guns. For example, what is so wrong with delaying an untrained person who might still be in their teens from buying such a lethal weapon, or at least requiring extra training and scrutiny?
Well, states may decide to do that. They've done that for handguns, and you know, we should really kind of rally around one legal age for adulthood. You know, historically it was 18, but now I guess no one at any age is able to buy a menthol cigarette or a vape product. But 21 years old for a lot of things, and you know, you're on your parents' insurance till you're 26. So there are a lot of ages that are bracketed in. But the right to keep and bear arms is in the Constitution. A lot of these other things, there's not a right to smoke in the Constitution. There's a right explicitly protected, not granted by the government, but protected by the Second Amendment, saying the government shall not infringe on that right.
Right, and unfortunately we don't have a lot of time to go into the constitutional arguments there, but the bottom line is people just look at this and say, 18-year-olds who were part of these 2 big mass shootings recently have underdeveloped brains, and yet they can just walk into a store and buy an AR-15, which is highly lethal, and kill innocent people. And I just think that is still something that is top of mind for people in this country. I want to go to the January 6 hearings. Witnesses testified that many Republican congressmen who are part of the Freedom Caucus asked Trump for pardons. You voted to decertify the results in 2 states. Do you recall conversations with your Republican colleagues about approaching the White House for a pardon?
I know there were some conversations about it because at the end of any administration, there's a lot of conversations about pardons. There were rumors that President Trump considered just providing a blanket pardon to, you know, anyone that may have been involved with what he was already being accused of. Is inciting a, you know, an insurrection, you know, a protest that turned violent at the Capitol, and I, you know, obviously he decided not to. But I, you know, as far as more details about, you know, who did what, you know, that, you know, I know I didn't ask for a pardon, but I do think a lot of people did phrase, hey, this may just be a preemptive thing so that the country can move on. I don't think anyone believes that I know believes. Well, I can't say that. I do know some Democrats who believe that there are crimes committed, but I don't think that there was anything to pardon people for. And so for that reason, I think the president said, yeah, it'll just look worse. I don't think there's anything to pardon.
Congressman Warren Davidson, great having you on. Thank you for your time and for sharing your perspective on these really important topics going on right now. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back.
I sold my car to pursue my dream of making undercover boots a reality. With just an idea written on a napkin, I moved back home to my childhood bedroom to start my new life. With a little help from my friends, my idea started to come to life. Boots that were fun, colorful, and inspired by the natural beauty of Panama. Sure, I made some mistakes. Like when my first shipment turned my mom's home into a warehouse, she almost kicked me out. But I persisted, and I grew with the business. We're creating jobs, happy customers, great relationships, and donation initiatives. And with great partners like DHL, we are leaving positive footprints all over the world.
The region's post-pandemic, or mid-pandemic, I should say, performance is, as you go across the 20 or so countries that make up the Middle East and North Africa, is as diverse as the 500 million people or so that live in it. We've been saying for a long time that the only way we can address, as a sort of silver bullet, the youth unemployment crisis and socioeconomic problems that we have and challenges we have across the region is by nurturing small businesses to create jobs, create opportunities, and pursue innovation. The problem is no one was investing in small businesses, but I see that changing. We need to create businesses as change agents who can in turn create the solutions both on a social and economic objective. One of the other trends we're seeing is where businesses are aligning with their social and environmental impact in addition to their, of course, financial impact as being one and the same in terms of stakeholder returns. So that, I think, is a positive trend we have to nurture.
Capital A, a Malaysian conglomerate best known for its low-cost airline, AirAsia, is going big on a new tech venture, a super app. The platform lets you reserve flights and hotels, as well as book rideshare and deliver food.
The idea for a super app is to become the center of the ecosystem. 80% of business revenue is still generated out of travel, and that gives us a very powerful positioning of our app today.
Growth plans for AirAsia's super app include Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, and Singapore. But the company has entered a market filled with steep competition. Southeast Asia is home to big name super apps like Singapore-based Grab and Indonesia's GoTo Group.
I think one of the biggest point of difference of AirAsia Super App versus many other competitors out there is we own the infrastructure.
Well, President Biden and his fellow G7 leaders are meeting in Germany, and at the same time, a fresh round of deadly attacks in Ukraine. An apartment complex in the capital, Kyiv, hit by Russian missiles. At least one person was killed and a 7-year-old girl was pulled from the rubble. One of the priorities at the G7, come up with a plan to stop Vladimir Putin. CNN's MJ Lee is following the summit. She joins us now. So MJ, what are G7 leaders proposing they do toward ending the war?
Well, the G7 leaders gathered in Germany are trying to figure out exactly that, a path forward on the war in Ukraine. They're, of course, trying to discuss different ways to continue ramping up the pressure on Russia. And, of course, the other part of it, too, is talking about ways to continue providing aid to Ukraine. And to that point, Pam, CNN is learning tonight that the U.S. could be announcing as early as this week that it has purchased an advanced medium to long-range surface-to-air missile defense system for Ukraine. This would, of course, just be a small part of the billions of dollars in aid that the United States has already provided in terms of military and security assistance to Ukraine. And the other thing I would note, too, is that earlier today, G7 leaders announced a new ban on import of new gold from Russia. This is just one more way, again, in which they're trying to sort of squeeze the Russian economy and try to make Vladimir Putin pay a price. Secretary of State Antony Blinken spoke with Jake Tapper earlier today and explained the rationale behind this move.
That is the second most lucrative export that Russia has after energy. It's about $19 billion a year. And most of that is within the G7 countries. So cutting that off, denying access to about $19 billion of revenues a year, that's significant. But beyond that, Jake, everything that we've done from the start in imposing these unprecedented sanctions and the export controls is having a profound impact on Russia. Even as it gets oil revenues with higher prices, it's unable to spend them because of the export controls.
And one important preview of what we might expect to see tomorrow, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, he is slated to give a virtual address to the G7. So this should provide an important update in terms of what he thinks the trajectory of the war is. And we also expect him to sort of lay out what he needs as the Ukrainians continue to fight against Russian aggression. And the other thing I would note, too, of course, is that President Biden next heads to Madrid, Spain. That is where the NATO summit is expected to take place. Of course, there, too, the war in Ukraine is expected to be a major topic. Pam.
MJ Lee, thank you so much. Well, the January 6th committee has been painting a damning picture of Donald Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election. And there are more public hearings to come. Up next on CNN Newsroom, committee member and Congressman Jamie Raskin joins me live to discuss who might testify at future hearings.
I'm Paula Newton in Ottawa, and this is CNN.
Across Africa, businesses are working together like never before. All new on CNN, Connecting Africa.
Join me and Lenny Jokos as we crisscross the continent to show you how new connections are revolutionizing commerce in Africa. This month, Connecting Africa from the Africa CEO Forum here in Côte d'Ivoire.
This forum really brings Africans together.
Connecting Africa on CNN, in association with Afreximbank.
Business is all about making connections. But some connections are easier to make than others. With a CNN partner hotel, the world is always at your fingertips. CNN partner hotels, connected to your world.
We're here at the home of one of the FSB team. Was it your team that poisoned Navalny?
What do you want the world to know?
People are so exhausted. Just gonna help her carry this bag.
Scores of Taliban fighters, and just behind us, the U.S. Embassy.
I'm the one who has to look them in the eye. Can I have your word? These people are depending on you.
Now they're pressing in. They want desperately to tell their stories.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
The attack on the Capitol and the case against Donald Trump. House lawmakers on the January 6th committee have used their first 5 public hearings to paint the portrait of a sitting president desperately and, as some officials have said, maybe criminally trying to subvert democracy and overturn the legitimate election of Joe Biden. Now, last week, state elections officials testified how Trump and his allies pressured them to decertify Joe Biden's legitimate election win. And on Thursday, 3 top officials from the Trump Justice Department described how they defied his pressure to act on baseless claims of voter fraud. Joining me now is a member of the Select Committee, Democratic Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland. Hi, Congressman. So those top justice officials testified in detail that Trump was relentless in attempting a coup. These were firsthand witnesses. These were former Trump loyalists. The name that was mentioned over and over again was White House counsel Pat Cipollone. What is the latest in getting him to testify?
Well, I believe the negotiations have continued. Obviously, the committee is very interested in hearing from Mr. Cipollone, who's come up at a number of points, and it appears as if he was a kind of red light for the president when he was trying to tear down a lot of legal boundaries to his just usurping the presidency. So it came up during the Department of Justice assault. It came up with counterfeit electors, trying to get the states to nullify the popular vote and so on. So we'd like to have him in to talk about the full merry-go-round of efforts to overthrow Biden's lawful win in the Electoral College.
We know there were one-on-one conversations between then President Trump and his Vice President Mike Pence. Considering what we have learned, is there still a chance that the committee might call Mike Pence?
Well, we're still in the investigative phase, and we are learning new things on a daily basis. This is a dynamic and continuing investigation, and so anyone who is a material witness who has relevant information could still be called. And of course, we don't just go out and subpoena people. We've been approaching everybody first to see whether they will cooperate voluntarily with the committee.
And one of the people you have done that with is Ginni Thomas, wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. Can you give us an update on that? Is she willing to come to testify behind closed doors in public about her connection to these efforts to overturn the election? What's going on that front?
You know, well, I'm not on the particular team that's working with that potential witness. I did read Ginni Thomas's public statements that she was very willing to come in and to clear the air and explain what exactly her involvement was. So I hope she does that. We've had more than 1,000 witnesses, and we think that everybody who has information relevant to the investigation should come forward and tell us about it.
Yeah, you've had some witnesses that were at top levels in the White House. You had White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson. You have White House counsel Eric Hirschman revealing the GOP members of Congress who were seeking pardons. Let's listen.
Was Representative Gates requesting a pardon?
Believe so. The pardon that he was discussing, requesting, was as broad as you could describe.
Mr. Bakes did. Mr. Jordan talked about congressional pardons, but he never asked me for one. Mr. Gomer asked for one as well. Mr. Perry asked for a pardon too. I'm sorry.
Did Marcia Levine contact you?
No, she didn't contact me about it. I heard that she had asked White House counsel's office for a pardon.
Different GOP members have denied or rationalized this. Will the committee be providing more evidence about the pardons and the requests, I should say?
Well, you know, a pardon is indicative of some kind of consciousness of guilt or at least fear of prosecution. It's not a crime for any of these members to ask for a pardon. You know, that would be their right. However, one cannot corruptly ask for a pardon, which means to seek a pardon in exchange for something else is kind of a political quid pro quo. So I think that, you know, if and when more information is revealed, we want to make everything public. But that's all I can really say about that at this point.
Do you have any evidence of a possible quid pro quo or anything like that?
No, but I'm just making the point that, you know, it's not criminal for people. Yeah, it's not criminal for people to seek a pardon unless there is a quid pro quo. I mean, that's just a statement of what the law is. But I think from a common sense perspective, it is indicative of consciousness of guilt, possible participation in some kind of criminal activity.
You are leading.
I mean, you know, I don't know anybody who's ever requested a pardon myself.
Okay. I'm going to ask you about the upcoming hearing. We have a little break here, a couple of weeks. You're going to be leading one of the upcoming hearings. Just if you would lay out what we can expect. Will there be any new information, new witness testimony? Can you give us a little window into what it might look like?
Well, you know, we've been pursuing a chronological breakdown of the events that took place leading up to January 6th, and now we're getting closer to January 6th. I've been working most intently on the mobilization of the mob and the domestic violent extremist groups like the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers and the Groypers and the 3%ers and so on. And so we want to explain both what happened with the mobilization of a violent fascistic street movement, and then how that insurrectionary mob violence converged with the attempt to coerce Mike Pence and Congress to step out of the way so that there could be essentially a seizure of the presidency by Donald Trump.
Just quickly, do you think that Donald Trump, by way of the actions you've laid out, that he was treasonous?
Well, you know, that's not a word that I have used, but, you know, I'm continuing to watch very carefully all of the evidence that's coming out in each of the hearings. Treason is the only crime we have that's actually defined in the Constitution, so it's a very strict proof of levying war against the United States or adhering to the enemies of the United States. So that's not something that we have advanced.
All right, Congressman Jamie Raskin, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Demonstrations after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade have been mostly peaceful, but there are new warnings of possible violence against officials, healthcare facilities, and even protesters. CNN national security analyst Juliette Kayyem joins me next. You're in the CNN newsroom.
From the tiniest warbler to the mightiest whale shark, nature is on the move, but natural paths are under threat. Now meet incredible conservationists, helping species cross highways, span flyways, and get from A to B.
This is nature's highway, and we must protect it.
Call to Earth, protecting nature's highways.
Saturday on CNN.
I believe we have an opportunity to move towards hope because we are learning more about this criminal enterprise. My name is Lisa C. Williams. I'm a philanthropist and an advocate for survivors of human trafficking. When I look back over 22 years of when I first started working in this space, I was simply trying to find safe shelter for girls who were 10 and 11 years old who were being bought and sold on our streets. One of the things that I remember very vividly, it was a turning point in our fight for Rachel's Law, is the CNN special, Children for Sale. It took something like that documentary that was hosted by Jada Pinkett Smith to wake up people and for them to want to look at it and understand what we were saying to them. And that just gave us momentum. And we took that film and we took it all over Georgia, and we galvanized people around a movement that we call the I Am Rachel movement to tell them about the safe harbor law that we were trying to get passed. And 83% of Georgians said, we agree that children are children and not the criminals.
Today, we live in an unpredictable environment, and news races around the world at breakneck speed. The missile struck right here. What is your interpretation of Putin's intention? My show brings you the latest news and top newsmakers. What does President Putin think he has achieved in Ukraine to date?
We just want to say stop to Vladimir Putin.
And we also dive below the headlines to explore vital issues impacting our lives. What are you looking at for the future with these additional formations that you've talked about, and where? What are the UN and other countries doing for you? Is it enough? It's crucial we make sense of what's happening.
We are doing this for our very survival.
What do you think a peace or a ceasefire or an end to this looks like? And fully understand what's at stake.
We have will, we have guts, and we are fighting like hell.
Amanpour, tonight on CNN.
Business never sleeps. As the sun sets in Seoul and Shanghai, deals are signed in Dubai, and Europe is already in play. New York prepares to make its first move. I'm Julia Chatterley, journalist, global market analyst, and host of CNN's First Move. Join me in the financial capital of the world for market-moving perspective on the news influencing global politics, culture, and finance. I'll speak to newsmakers, risk takers, and the ultimate game changers.
Bold moves, big deals, winning trades. It's all right here. Make CNN your first move.
First Move with Julia Chatterley. Today on CNN.
Tempers and emotions have been flaring this weekend over the Supreme Court ruling on abortion rights. 2 people were arrested for allegedly throwing paint over the fence by the Supreme Court building, and 6 people were arrested in Greenville, South Carolina during a demonstration. These are just 2 examples where no one was seriously hurt. But Homeland Security officials are warning of possible extremist violence in the wake of Roe's reversal. A department memo says federal and state government officials, including judges, probably are most at risk for violence in response to the decision. CNN national security analyst Juliette Kayyem joins me now. Her new book, The Devil Never Sleeps, Learning to Live in an Age of Disasters, is out now. Wow, what an encouraging title there for your book here, Juliette. Wow, it is true, right? And now we're talking about this memo that is including these warnings about First Amendment protected events, reproductive and family advocacy, healthcare facilities, and faith-based organizations being targets for violence or criminal incidents. What do you think about this? Does DHS, you think, have intel on possible attacks, or is this just like preemptive?
This is preemptive. And look, the intelligence chatter since the leak of the memo before the decision came down had already animated various groups, including obviously focus on particular Supreme Court justices. Whatever your politics are, the focus or the attempted violence against Justice Kavanaugh is not legitimate. It's a federal crime, and it's something that has to be addressed. That elevated level of violence towards justices or even judges is then reflected also in the public discourse. Look, we have an opinion that is really challenging. I'll take the politics out of it. It basically says that something is not constitutional, reproductive freedom. Lots of people who believe in the decision also believe that abortion is murder. And yet the Supreme Court is for now still allowing reproductive freedom in whatever states choose to have it. That gap is something that intelligence agencies and domestic experts on radicalism are looking at. It's an unmanageable gap, if you know what I mean. It's just, we still have reproductive freedom in about half the states. For those who oppose abortion and are actually promoting now a federal abortion ban, that gap becomes where the conflict is, either, because they want it to end or not. Then, on the other side, we've seen the growth of some groups, some radical groups related to protecting reproductive freedoms that are also disconcerting to law enforcement.
Yeah, certainly passions, emotions are running high right now.
Yeah.
For people who just feel so strongly about this. You tweeted, the biggest public safety concern is not peaceful protests. Sure, police need to be reminded the rules of engagement, but the bigger concern is in states where access to reproductive freedom still exists, but it's contentious, or ones that are set to close down access. If you would go into a little more about that.
Yeah. So the history of the pro-life movement has been a legal movement, of course, right? In other words, and successful as of Friday. But there has also been an element of violence to it. And while, once again, while I'm going to stay out of the politics of it, it's disingenuous to say that there hasn't been violence as part of the pro-life movement in terms of attacking and killing doctors who perform abortions, or attacking and targeting abortion clinics. That's just part of the narrative. You're being political if you don't admit it, right? So because of that, law enforcement has been worried because they don't know where that goes for reproductive facilities, reproductive choice facilities that still exist, right? So now they still exist. They are still lawful to this day. And so I think that's the gap that makes law enforcement nervous in terms of an intelligence perspective, because there are people who believe that this is murder. There is a very, very small element that has used violence in the past of that group. And yet reproductive freedoms are still allowed in half the states, or slightly less than half the states. And that's that gap where we need to focus less on political discourse or what's happening on Twitter. I could care less what's happening on Twitter. Focus on where women are still able to assert a right that is recognized, at least for now, by the Supreme Court. But I do want to say, because there is political discussion about a federal anti-abortion ban, that just means that their work isn't done, right? In other words, that this will continue. The idea that this is somehow settled legally, politically, emotionally is just the most ridiculous thing, and therefore that is where you're going to see these debates.
Yeah, you're so right. It is far from that. Yeah. Juliette Kayyem.
This is the beginning for both sides. Yeah,
it's so true. And both sides think, they have the right view, that their view is the right one. And that is why you're seeing these emotions running so high. We'll be right back. Thank you.
The ever-changing weather around the world. Ever-diverse terrain and roads across the world. With Kumho Tire that has conquered all. There is no road you cannot go. Go with Kumho. Kumho Tire.
I'm Hadas Gold in Jerusalem, and this is CNN.
Connect the World with Becky Anderson.
It all starts here. Changing, fighting, creating, connecting. That's why we're here. We live here, we work here, we're from here, and we'll go wherever the story takes us. I'm Becky Anderson in Tehran. We are in Jerusalem. Real news that shapes our world. Exploring not just what's going on, but why. I just want to press you on one further point. Getting perspective on this region from this region. Places that many of us know, but few of us get to see. Observing countries on the move, still rooted in tradition. It all starts here, and that's why we're here, bringing you the world from our Middle Eastern hub.
Connect the World with Becky Anderson, today on CNN.
You can help the refugees from Ukraine. Join the over 80,000 who've already raised millions for food, shelter, and more. Explore cnn.com/impact. Click to take action.
These troops, they are Russian. I've spoken to the commander. He said they are now in control. Over that way. It's a secret location. They're going to fire on Russian forces. There has been a ferocious battle here. There's unexploded grenades everywhere. We're being shown the powerful American guns, giving them an edge.
You downplayed the US intelligence assessments. Do you now regret that?
I'm in Kiev right now, and it is under attack, Mr. Lavrov, from Russian forces.
I'm being told by our security that we need to get our flak jackets on.
No matter where you are in this country, lives are being shattered.
There are thousands streaming out. It is at least a chance to save their own lives. Matthew Chance, CNN.
The journey to the top for a successful business in Africa starts with an idea. But how does a concept become a moneymaker? African and global industry leaders share their stories on Profit Point in CNN Marketplace Africa.
If you're in a heterosexual partnered relationship, I have some questions for you. All right, you got to be honest here. Who last emptied the dishwasher? Who took the kids shopping for new shoes or new clothes? Who cooked dinner? Think about those. Think about the answer. These questions are behind an eye-opening new documentary called Fair Play.
I had the breast pump in the diaper bag in the passenger seat of my car. I was racing to get Zach at his toddler transition program. I had a client contract in my lap. The pen would stab me in the vagina. Seth decided to send me a text. I'm surprised you didn't get blueberries. I remember thinking to myself, I'm the default for literally every single household and domestic task for my family.
When I became a mom, I felt like my identity completely changed.
I really didn't understand the amount that she had to endure.
Es una presión tremenda.
Tremenda, yeah.
It goes back to the twisted notion of, well, you just got to ask for their help. I don't want to ask.
What time? Yeah, I have 2 phone calls from work already today.
I became obsessed with a quest to figure out what was happening to us.
When it comes to care, we're so far behind.
We're saying we value work more than we value our families.
There's this hidden message there, which is it's just too expensive to support women.
Work-family conflict, it's not even about women. It's about men and gender pressures on men.
It is for men what feminism is for women.
For women to step into their full power in the world, it requires men to step into their full power in the home. That's a legacy that we all deserve.
Joining me now, Eve Rodsky, author of Fair Play, and Jennifer Siebel-Newsom, who produced, wrote, and directed the documentary. Hi, ladies. Wow, what a trailer that was. So, Jennifer, we booked this discussion before Friday's Supreme Court decision overturning Roe v. Wade. I have to address the fact that one of the main ways that women have found any agency in the society is by managing their own fertility. What do you think about this? What if that ability is compromised or taken away?
No, thank you for
bringing us to the reality of this really dark, new reality for so many Americans and people who can get pregnant. And it's just a really scary time. And unfortunately, women once again are being punished and controlled by an extreme far-right agenda, evangelical agenda that really is, you know, the patriarchy still at work and still in control in our country, and unfortunately the highest court in our country. And so we're going to pay the price. We're still not paid equitably. We are a country that doesn't have universal paid family leave or universal child care, or universal sick leave. And so we're struggling, right? We still don't value the family. We don't even have recognize women and the family in the Constitution, and women are now relegated to second-class citizenhood. And so it's a really, really dark time in our history, and women and families are going to pay the price, and this is very dangerous. And it set us back 150 years.
Yeah, and as you know, there are millions of others on the other side of this issue who are applauding this, right? Women included, women that I have interviewed who are applauding this, who say this is protecting the weakness. This is what we have been fighting for the last 50 years. And this is coming at a time, Eve, as we see the concurrence from Justice Thomas, even wanting to revisit the right to use contraception. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that this is not about babies. If this was about babies, then we would have universal child care in America. We would have paid leave in America. We would actually care to have access to schools that are not just till 2:30. But we know that this is really about power and control. And really, it comes down to what we're talking about in the film. That women are the social safety net for this country. And as we add more caregivers, because we have less access to control our own reproduction, and we will have more forced births, then we're going to have more caregivers, and we're going to have more mothers continuing to burn out at the pace that we're putting them at. We're making them be the breadwinners for their family. We're making them do the supermajority of childcare and housework in their homes. During the pandemic, we were making them homeschool their children. It's unsustainable, actually. It feels incredibly unsustainable.
Let's talk a little bit more about this documentary. It started as a spreadsheet. It then became a book. Modern women have been talking about unequal division of labor for decades, but the needle hasn't really moved as much as many women say it should. The fact is, we still live in a patriarchal society. So how is this ever going to change, especially in the wake of this abortion decision, Eve?
Well, I think the only way it's going to change, as you saw in the trailer, is if we start to invite men to their full power in the home so that women can step into their full power in the world. And what this film does is it shows the benefits. The benefits. This is not chores and housework and who takes out the garbage or who left the sponge in the sink. Who taught us to ride a bike? Who we went grocery shopping with? Who we made our meals with. Mm-hmm. This work, the unpaid labor of our society, is our true humanity.